Hello everyone, welcome to ADRA Asia's podcast, While on Earth.
Happy, efficient and productive.
I'm very passionate about young people.
Currently leading the disaster risk management unit of ADRA.
Overnighting, it's a long process.
Welcome everyone to While on Earth, the podcast run by ADRA Asia. Here with me is a friend of mine from New Zealand, Sahara. Sahara, who are you?
Oh, talofa, Prabuk.
Is that the way you greet in
Samoa,
Samoa?
it's talofa.
Talofa.
And in New Zealand, it's kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Is
Very
that
close.
okay? Very close.
Okay enough. Talofa, everybody. My name is Sahara Anae. I'm the International Program Director for ADRA New Zealand. And I have served ADRA New Zealand for almost 9 years now, from 2016 to date. And that's, in a nutshell, who I am.
Where did your ADRA journey begin?
Well, the funny news is that I have worked in the government department since I graduated from my Bachelor's of Engineering. And it's quite ironic that my name is a desert, but I specialize in water.
Water engineering.
Yes.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
And I've been working with you for that.
I'm a civil and environmental engineer,
Right.
and I major in fluid mechanics.
Wow.
I love physics, and all sorts of water supply, water systems, potable water, that is, drinking water, is my area of specialty. Designing, construction, and commissioning water supply systems, and I've been doing that for the last 21 years of my life now, and 9 of those is through ADRA.
Right. So you still get to use that knowledge through the ADRA
Oh,
program?
absolutely. Everywhere we work, because that's one of our, strategic pillars.
Yes.
Under health, is the wash component, water sanitation and hygiene. So across the Pacific and in Asia is where I continue to deliver this work.
Right.
Amongst many other things that we have to cover.
Right. So, Sahara, tell us, what are you passionate about?
I am passionate about serving others.
Okay.
And I suppose that's, a huge and a very broad statement to make. I am passionate in elevating our Pacifica people, really. I suppose like in the Pacifica space, because that's where I'm born and raised.
Right.
But people in general, to be honest. In the works that we're doing, it's almost like doing development differently.
Right.
And, government agencies, major donors and whatnot, they're constantly talking about how can we do development differently. And I suppose the whole entire goal of asking that question is to really genuinely achieve sustainable development.
Right.
Which, I think maybe 98% of the works that we do, it works at the time that we do it, but as soon as we leave,
It's gone.
it's gone. And that's not sustainability at all. So my passion really falls into the space of Indigenous practices and approaches,
Right.
because I feel like that, as that being the forefront of how we deliver development, only bringing in, foreign and modern technologies and methodologies where it makes sense is how we can achieve that. Because, through Indigenous approaches, it's a mechanism that our communities in the Pacific are familiar with. It is them, they are familiar in that space, and they don't feel like they're doing specific works or activities for you. They're doing it for them, so there's a huge mental and psychological shift in itself when you put Indigenous practices, and approaches as a forefront of how we deliver our work and how we serve people.
Right. So before we drill down a little bit more into this IP or Indigenous practices, when you say the Pacific, what are the countries that come under the term Pacific?
So where we currently work, because the Pacific is huge.
Vast, yeah.
So I'll just speak on the Pacific, where
The
ADRA
countries
New
that you
Zealand
work,
currently
yeah.
works. And we are in Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Vanuatu.
Not in
So
Samoa?
these are the 3 countries, not in Samoa yet.
Yet. So there is some plan to
Not in
enter.
Samoa yet.
Okay.
And we do want to move into, the Kiribati, because these are, the Pacific nations that are severely impacted by climate change, and domestic and international migration due to climate impact. The likes of Kiribati, Tonga, where we don't exist.
Right.
More like the ADRA organizations don't really exist, but a space we really want to get into.
Right. So, on indigenous practices or population, no.
Approaches?
IP? Approaches,
Yeah.
yeah. What is the difference between what we've been doing now for many years and now this approach? What's the key difference?
Yeah. So
in terms of processes?
yeah.
Let's start there.
Well, okay. I mean, let's talk about the mental shift of it.
Okay.
And let's talk about the relevance and validity of practices, of indigenous practices. And I'm going to pull in real life
Go ahead.
examples.
Yes.
And just to let you know that I'm not talking fluff.
Right.
Because talking fluff for people in international development and programs in general,
It's very common.
we don't like fluff.
Yes.
We want, if anybody who talks fluff to us, we always ask the question, okay, what does that look like at a practical application
Right.
level?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because we
Yes.
are people who want to touch things. We're hands and feet people.
Right.
So these are the examples that I want to give you in indigenous practices and in elevating those. In Nokuku, Vanuatu, where we work, the community of Nokuku during planting, tending, and harvesting of their crops,
Okay.
they sing all throughout these processes, these periods, these times. They sing, right? And I asked one of the farmers there, why do we do that? Why do we sing? I'm singing along with them, because they're singing. Why do you sing? I said, oh, it's been done by our ancestors, since the time of our ancestors. So it's hundreds of years they've been doing this, and they continue to practice, this singing during the time of their planting. And, it was only until a few years ago that science proved that noise vibration helps plants grow better. But Nokuku has been doing it for hundreds of years.
Okay.
So when does indigenous practices become just as relevant and as valid as science?
Yes.
Do you understand the
Yeah.
essence of where we're coming from?
Right.
Right?
Right.
So it's that whole recognition, and it's that whole movement, and it's using these, real life experiences and practices that people are doing to say to the outside world, what we are doing is not just fluff
Yeah.
things. There is a science behind the things that we do, even though it was done by our ancestors for hundreds of years. There is science behind it. Believe me, believe us.
Yes.
It's more like the calling. You know what I mean? And I feel like if there is trust in science, and there can be the same level of trust in indigenous practices, then there's, there'll be a different mental shift from the outside world to view our people in the Pacifica differently in that space. And that space is theirs. It's not a space of others, it's the
Yes.
space of our people.
Yes.
And they're elevated in that space. And there's so many goodness that comes from being recognized in that space. We're no longer in a situation where we feel like I'm forcing you to do something because I believe where I come from, is better than where you are at. But under whose definition is better? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And another example of that is, let's take our SDGs, our Sustainable Development Goals, for example. I'll pull out one word, and this word is poverty. Poverty is defined by SDG as anyone living under $1.25 US a day.
Yeah.
And our Pacifica people is like, well, that will make all of us poor and living under poverty, right? And the Pacifica context of what poverty means is one's inability to live with no money, your inability to live with $0 And the whole focus is because these are people who are connected to their land and their sea. Money is not the value. The value sits on the land, the value sits on the sea, because this is what sustains them as communities, as people, in their, throughout their lives. The money is something that was introduced.
Yeah.
But if anyone, like in a remote community, for example, they don't prioritize, I must earn an income so that my family can live this week. They don't talk that language. The language is the soil must be tended to so that I can grow and harvest in these certain periods of time. I must fish so that we can bring in, this different kind of nutrition, to feed the family and the communities. So you see the whole shift in that context.
So
because
that doesn't become a point of measuring their success.
It is.
Finances.
I mean, and the measuring of successes, the measure of economic resilience, for example, the measure of what poverty means, for example, our Pacifica people feel like they're being forced to meet a criteria that is defined by somebody else who is not them.
Yeah.
And that's where the struggle and the challenge is coming in from. It's not because they can't achieve what you want them to achieve. It's because it doesn't make sense to them what that means.
Right.
Because their context of poverty, their context of richness means different to your definition.
Yes. So what is in their definition? What does poverty look like for them? In their definition. So
Their inability to now farm their land and their sea. So you see, this is now the twist of where climate change and climate impact comes in, right? Soil salinity, for example, has increased because of long droughts.
Right.
Right? And they have to, what's happening here, they can't farm the lands the same way they used to farm. Fishing, for example, an abundance. They don't have to spend hours in the sea. An abundance of fish. But with the overfishing of the EEZ zone, for example, and the temperature rises in the sea itself, it's changing the dynamics of their fishing, of their fishing lifestyle, their fishing ways. They're not catching as much. So because of that, they have to force their children to go into the towns, into the city, and even into RSE work. Do you know what RSE work
No,
is?
I don't know.
So these are seasonal workers that Australia and New Zealand bring from the Pacific to pick apples.
Right. Okay. So they fly out.
They fly out and they become seasonal workers to earn an income, because that has to now try and substitute the impact that climate change is having on their way of life, because they can no longer, live from the land and the sea the same way they used to 10 years ago.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yes. Is this a difficult concept to sell to donors?
Not at all. I think when I used to think that way, absolutely. But now I'm a bit more courageous, if you like to. And I suppose it comes with age.
Yes.
The older you are, and it's like,
More experience
I'm
you
going
are,
to choose
yes.
my battles. I don't have time. I have enough gray hair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it's like, and with the donor that we have, because we work together with our New Zealand government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, MFAT, they're excited. They're excited about this because we took courage. We said, you know what, this is how it's going to happen. This is what sustainable development should look like. And we are convicted. We are, just like how I believe in God, I believe this is the answer to it. And the donors are excited about this space because it's not just seeing a movement in the way, in the impact and the shifts of the way things used to be in how we deliver development. It is also seeing something different in terms of reporting, because we are also bringing in what we call Indigenous data. And Indigenous data has no numbers. You know what I mean? Indigenous data is people telling their stories.
So more qualitative.
It is
information.
absolutely qualitative. Absolutely qualitative. So we have a new person coming into ADRA New Zealand, for example, who holds a master's in M&E.
Okay.
And his job is now to put numbers in this qualitative data, because MFAT understands the feel and the essence of it. And the numbers, when they see numbers, that's all they see. There's no depth. There's no depth of understanding on what the story is behind those numbers, but they know the depth and the story behind those numbers, because this is a different type of reporting that we're doing with them, because we don't want them just to be a donor.
Yes.
We want them to be a part of this journey, so that the shift is also created in their mindsets. It's like, here's the money, go and change their behavior. And it's like, but you need to change your behavior too.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yes. So how do you go about setting targets in a situation like this?
Oh, it's just like everything else.
You would do
It's just like everything
baseline,
else.
something
That's
like that?
right.
And then agree with the
whole
community.
The whole entire process, okay, if we were to start from the beginning of once we have an invitation from the donor, we have this amount of money, and we're looking towards this space. And mind you, the spaces and the strategies of our donors and national and international donors anyway, they meet our ADRA strategies.
Yeah.
And they meet the strategies of the in-country governments.
Right.
Because they all work towards, this Paris Agreement. That is the global, this is like the global target sort of thing. They work towards this Paris Agreement. There are things to be achieved, even though different donor partners and different country levels implement this in their own context. It all achieves one goal. This one, global goal, if we put it in that way. So once we get this invitation in, we go into the communities, and the communities are dictated by their own governments. Their own governments will say to us, these are the communities that live under the poverty line.
In their context.
No, in the context of a foreign
Right,
context.
okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's fine. That's fine, because we can't change everybody at the same time. But we gotta start somewhere, right?
Okay.
These are the communities that are living under the poverty line, and we want you to cover, say, there's 30 of them. And we say, okay, unfortunately, we probably only have funding for 10.
Okay.
And they're like, okay, fine, this is the 10. We go out to communities, and the communities identify what the needs are, what their priorities are, and we don't limit them. It's anything and everything, because if you tell the story of what that is, even though it sounds like it is outside of the portfolio you want to work in, trust me, it is connected. One form or the other, when you tell the story, it will all be connected. We take all of that in, and then we build a framework around what the community needs are, and the design starts to develop from there on. So when we say, this design is community centered, it is, communities have been consulted, ADRA New Zealand is very genuine in that task. We do not take that task for granted, because we do not want our energy and the community's energy wasted on something they do not need.
Right.
You know what I mean? So this is the whole entire, integration of community voice into things that are coming into their communities.
Right. So, what are the successes you had so far?
Oh, it's been amazing. What we have done is, it's almost like identifying what are the current structures that we hold in this space in the different areas that we are looking at. And there's so many, so I'll try to be very specific in a few. So let's take gender-based violence, for example.
Okay.
Right? Now, the gender-based violence system is a foreign system. This is the call line.
Oh, yeah, okay.
This is the referral system.
Right, referral system.
You call in, and then we do the referral, and then someone will come and get you, and then someone will put you in a safe house, blah, 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 blah. The problem is, when there is a disaster, such as a cyclone, which happens once or twice a year in the Pacific, guess what happens to that referral system?
Gone.
Wah, wah. There are no roads, it's damaged.
Yes.
There are no phones, it's damaged.
Yes.
Even your mobile phone doesn't work, the towers are not working. There's no network to even make that connection. And guess where the highest level of stress comes in? Post-disaster. That's where the highest level of communities come in, because they're stressed. Their house is fallen, there's nothing to eat, everything is damaged. Where are we going to get water from? The kids are crying. Somebody is injured. It is the highest level of stress. And with stress comes what? Violence. There's violence against women, violence against children. And this is just like in a physical sense because I'm stronger.
Right.
You know, and they have to take their frustration out somewhere. And this is probably,
In the family setup,
yeah.
this is where
Some men take a walk. You know, some men go off and they're like, you know what, I'm not going to. And some men don't.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So this is what we're seeing.
And that's probably the time when the referral system is down.
Oh, it is. I tell you what, Prabhu, nothing has ever worked. In the 9 years that I've been working within that field, and many more years before that in the government sector, none of these referral systems have ever worked. And even if you manage to get somebody on the other side, how are they going to come and get you?
Yeah. And
There
that's
is no
also
way.
actually separation, no?
Yeah, yeah.
So what's the alternative?
So, and then we said, look, these communities have their own internal structures as communities. They have been able to operate and function fully as communities for hundreds of years before these systems even came in. And they were in harmony with those structures that they hold. Us as ADRA come in, we say, what are the current structures that you have within your community? Did you know that every community in the Pacific has a committee of mothers? There's a committee of tina.
Right.
There's a committee of
What do they call
mothers. Well, I call it committee of tina, which means the committee of mothers.
Okay.
And their function is just to beautify, make sure things are okay, you know, and they even they decorate the church. They just have different function as mothers. And it's like, but they're there and they've functioned for hundreds of years in this structure that they have in the community. What we can do is we can build the capacity of this committee to be the forefront of when violence happens in their community.
Defend,
To protect, to house, to separate the victim from the perpetrator. Because sometimes your anger can only last for 24 hours. It may be, you know, it could be just a fight in the fight. And if people recover from their fights, the man will come back and say, oh, I'm sorry, my love, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Because it's just the immediate stress and the immediate response that happens there. But the mothers are there and they hold that capacity to do that. And that also alleviates a lot of the stress on this referral system that they have, because now there's not a million people going in at the same time.
Yeah.
There's only a few, because the Mothers Committee are able to hold the fort within their community with the capacity that they have. It is only when something is far beyond their capacity, example, somebody got hurt or somebody got killed, that they then reach out to the referral system and they say, this is what is happening.
Right.
We need your support to do this.
When it's really, really serious.
Yeah,
and it
that's
surpasses
right.
their capacity.
Only when it is
Do
beyond
they
them.
also have this mothers group? Do they have significant authority or power or influence with the men also? Because they could use the men
huge.
to.
We have male advocates as well, just so
Right.
you know. And the biggest group of male advocates that we have are the youth, because that's the generation you need to change. That's the generation you need to weave into the space of doing something alternative than their fathers and grandfathers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, and these are the ones that you say, look, you are young enough and smart enough to break the chain and to make these changes for your family and then to your sons and then to your grandsons, so that future generation of men, you know, can have a bit, they just require tools, you know, just additional tools to, like, this is what alternative things that I can do when I am angry.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So our male advocates is major in the space of youth, the boys in the youth.
Right.
And then we have some who are their fathers, you know, and some who are their grandfathers. But, you know,
Right.
the older guys is a bit harder to change,
Yeah.
if you get what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
But the youth boys,
They're more open.
they're more open.
Yeah.
You know, and they have technology in their hands as well, you know, so they're open to seeing the outside world through their devices. And because of that, it's like, all right, you know, yeah,
We
absolutely,
need to
this is
change.
something.
We need to change.
And they identify it as a problem. They don't identify it as a solution. They identify it as a problem.
Wow.
And they don't want to be in that situation,
Yeah.
you know?
I find this really fascinating because a while back we had a discussion with Howard from the UK, and he brought up this topic of indigenous practices,
Yeah.
right? And you are actually now maybe I would say filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
And I hear that you also have a methodology to
Yeah.
do this in the communities, right? So ADRA officers can access it if they write
We've
to
got the
ADRA New
framework.
Zealand.
We've got the framework. We can pass you guys the programmatic design that we have, and in this programmatic design are the individual in-countries
Right.
plan, and we call it in-country plans.
Okay.
Individual, because don't forget, each of these countries come with their own cultures and their own context.
Yes.
And we're like, it doesn't matter how you roll it out, but this is our common goal. This is our common outcome. It does. You roll it out in a way that makes sense for your people,
Yes.
for your communities. You don't have to try and bring in a New Zealand community and try and replicate that in here. No. And it's working. We are 4 years of actioning this vision.
Nice.
4 years in of actioning this vision. And each year we go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I tell you what, Prabhu, there's also a level of fatigue that comes into that space. You know, there's a lot of hurt that comes into that. There's a lot of mind-opening moments.
I can see that.
Yeah. And then there's a level of guilt that comes into that space.
What have we been doing for many years?
Yeah. I mean, you know what I mean? There's just that. So expect, and I didn't prepare myself for that fatigue, but as soon as I identified it, I said to myself, this is what I must build myself up for. But there is that level of fatigue that comes. Don't stop.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Don't stop. This is part of the process. This is part of the journey. And if you're hurting now, the healing is much more longer than the short-term pain is for the long-term gain.
Right.
You know?
And when you see the results, it's justified, no?
I tell you, the whole world is going to move towards this direction, and that's the goal of our tiny little office and the tiny little Pacific that it has for the rest of the world.
I would really like to take that and amplify it also in Asia amongst our officers. So
absolutely.
I will get in touch with you to make sure these resources are available also to the officers in Asia, so that we can start at least piloting it with our projects.
Exciting.
Last question.
Yeah.
If you had a superpower, what would it be and how
superpower.
would you use it?
How will I use it?
Yes.
Oh, duh. If I had a superpower, I would be Mystique. You know who Mystique is?
A character in X-Men, right?
It is a character in
I've not
X-Men.
watched
It is a
X-Men for a long
girl
time.
character in X-Men. And this character shifts and changes.
Okay, that one.
That one.
Shapes.
She's blue.
Right.
Yeah. And she changes into anybody that she sees or comes in contact with, or even walking past. She can change her whole physical being, even the eyes. She can change into that person. And you know, the eyes is a very hard thing to change because it's easy to change the physical. Well, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Superpowers.
Yeah, I've seen people change the color of the eyes at least.
Contact. But I would be Mystique.
Right. And
And
what would you use it for?
I would change into all the country leaders and end all the wars, declare it the end of all wars and the end of all poverty. That's what I would do, and then change back to myself and go, haha. That's
Sahara,
the superpower.
Yeah. Thank you very much for making time to be on the show.
Thank you.
And I hope we can have a follow-up conversation at some point.
Absolutely.
To discuss the progress that you've made and maybe, hopefully, the progress that we've made with the model that
Yeah.
you will share as well.
And we're happy to share with you our reports submitted to MFAT as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Those will be really useful.
Yeah. No worries.
Okay. Thank you everyone for tuning in and watching our podcast today. Please make sure that you will also watch the next one that will come in a few weeks. Thank you to Sahara and the ADRA New Zealand team for all the work that you do. Please make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and until next time, goodbye.